So on 1, A, B, C, D, if I look at A, so our function, we have x plus 2 over x squared minus 9, which would factor into x plus 3, x minus 3. When I ask for the domain, I'm asking what x can be. We know that in a fraction, the denominator can't be 0. So we get that x can't be plus or minus 3. Since it's more than one value, you can leave it like that. If you chose to write interval, it would be everything smaller than -3, everything between -3 and 3, everything bigger than 3. Now, your domain and your vertical asymptote are practically the same. Your domain, x doesn't exist there because we have a vertical asymptote there. Okay, when I'm talking about that rational function, we know at positive and -3, there are going to be asymptotes. So the actual curve doesn't exist there. So this was my domain, the not equal to. The asymptote would be x equals each of those things. Asymptotes are lines. You must give me equations. I have said that probably 100 times in this chapter, and there's still people not writing equations. Okay, they are lines. You can't just say 3. You have to tell me x equals 3. Horizontal or oblique, we always divide the highest powers of x. So we had x on top, x squared on the bottom. If you end with more x's on the bottom, that means it's a horizontal, y equals 0. Alright, so the first questions on your test are going to be related to this. This is what we did back in section 5.1. We found domains, and we gave the equations of asymptotes without actually graphing them. So, we should all be able to do that. Let's go ahead and look at B as well. So this time, we had x squared plus 4 over x minus 2. Domain. In a fraction, the bottom cannot be 0, so x cannot be 2. Now, if it's only one value that x can't be, I have asked you to give me the interval, so it's everything except 2. So -infinity to 2, union 2 to infinity. How do we know the vertical asymptote? It's just when the bottom does equal 0. So it's at x equals 2. The thing that x is not in the domain is because there is an asymptote there. Horizontal or oblique. If we divide our highest powers, x squared over x, when you do that, you're left with x on top, which means it is what? Oblique. When we have oblique, how do we find it? Long division. So the top goes underneath. You can put in a 0x if you would like. And the x minus 2 goes outside. Alright, this is just like when you learned long division back in elementary school. It's a 3-step process. You divide, you multiply, you subtract. First step, we divide. What is x squared divided by x? X. Second step, we multiply. What is x times x minus 2? Third step, I need to subtract that off. So if I run a negative through, those cancel. 0x plus 2x is 2x plus 4. Now we're back up to the first step. Divide. What is 2x divided by x? 2. And that is all you need. So your oblique is y equals x plus 2. Is that okay? C, your domain should have been -infinity to -2, union -2 to infinity. Vertical asymptote, x equals -2, horizontal, y equals +2. Do I need to go through that one? D, your domain is -infinity to 1, union 1 to infinity. Vertical asymptote, x equals 1. That one, when you go to divide your highest powers of x, you have x to the 5th over x cubed. If you divide those, you're still left with an x squared. Is that a line? No, so that one doesn't have horizontal or oblique. All right, are we okay with question number 1? So you're going to have a few of those on your test. Everyone knows what to do. Okay, question number 2. I just gave you a picture and you had to tell me the asymptotes. So let's check and see if you got them. On A, vertical, those vertical lines are x equals -1, x equals +1. If you don't have the x equals, it's wrong. Your horizontal, there's not a dashed line label, but if you look at your curve, what is it approaching? 0. So horizontal is y equals 0. B, you have vertical at what values?
2 and -2.
Horizontal, this one is drawn in. You have a horizontal line at y equals -1. All right. Any issues with the front page? Okay, so the graphs. We had quite a few of these on here. You can expect to have 3 or 4 of these on your test, and these are worth probably like 10 points each, so you need to know what you're doing. Which of these would you like for me to work out? Give me a couple. A, D.
Well, C, or did you see?
Yeah.
All right, I did.
You're welcome. All right, so on A, the very first step is always to factor. X squared minus 6x plus 9 factors into x minus 3 squared, or x minus 3 times x minus 3. So your x-intercept, we made a whole list yesterday. I told you x-intercept is what makes the top 0. What makes x minus 3 equal 0? 3. Now, something we know already. That one was squared, which means it has a multiplicity of 2. So what's going to happen on that? It's going to bounce when I hit that one. And I know that from the last chapter. If something's squared, it's going to bounce. Okay, y-intercept. You find that by putting in 0 for all of your x's. You get 9 over 0. Can you do 9 divided by 0? So it means there's none. Vertical asymptote is from the denominator. What makes x squared equal 0? 0. So the vertical line is 0. Make sure you are plotting everything you find. Horizontal or oblique. If we divide our highest powers of x, x squared divided by x squared is 1. So it's y equals 1. Okay, and then I told you, you might need to plug in some points to see what's going on. If I put in a -1, I get -4 squared, so 16 over 1. So it's 16, so it's a really high value, so I know this section is up here. All right, this one's a little bit confusing. I have a point here, but I know it's supposed to bounce there. So let's put in a couple points. If I put in a 1, -2 squared is 4 over 1. So 1 is giving me out 4. So it's up here. But I know it has to be getting closer to my asymptote. So what's going to happen is it's going to come down, hit this point, but it has to bounce. So it's going to get closer to the asymptote from the bottom. That's kind of unusual. We haven't had a whole lot that look like that, but we have talked about you can cross a horizontal. And the whole reason I knew that section was going to be weird was because it was squared. And so I knew it had to bounce at that point, not just go through it like normal. Is that one okay? If I look at C, we first have to factor. So if we do slip and slide, x minus 8, x plus 1, divide the 2 back. So the top factors into x minus 4, 2x plus 1. The bottom, that would factor into x minus 4, x plus 3. what happens right there?
There's a whole 4.
The x minus 4 is canceled. That's why it's so important to factor at the beginning, because if you didn't cancel those, you were going to end up with extra intercepts, extra asymptote, and your whole graph doesn't work. So when I see that, I know I have a hole in the graph. To find the x value, you look at the thing that cancels. What makes x minus 4 equal 0? 4. To get the y, we plug 4 into what's left. So that gives me 9 over 7. On your graph, a hole is just an open circle. So now, the rest of my information is based off that fraction highlighted in green, our reduced one. X-intercept is when the top is 0. So that means 2x equals -1, so x is -1/2. So we plot that on our graph. Y-intercept is when you put in 0 for all of your x's. And you get 1/3. Vertical, you set the bottom equal to 0. And we get -3. Horizontal or oblique, we divide our leading powers of x. It does not matter if you do the original or this reduced one. If I'm looking right here, I have 2x divided by x, which is 2. So my horizontal y equals 2. Okay, so my graph, none of my intercepts, my x-intercept wasn't squared, so we know it's not doing anything weird there. So this section has to go through these points to be getting closer to our asymptote, getting closer to this asymptote. If I plug in a number over here, so maybe a -4, and if I put that into the original, -8 plus 1 is -7 over -1, which is 7. So that's up here, so that means this section of the graph is above our horizontal asymptote. Is that one okay? Did you guys get B with the oblique asymptote? Y equals 2x plus 3 for the oblique on that one. Okay. Was D the other one we asked about? Okay. So, first step is factoring. On the test, it will say part A, factor the numerator and denominator. X minus 2 won't factor. Denominator would factor into x minus 5x plus 1. Nothing cancels, so there's no hole, nothing squared, so I don't have to worry about bounces, nothing weird here. How do we find x-intercept? So we get 2. Intercepts are points. So we hit the x-axis at +2. How do we find a y-intercept? So 0 minus 2 is... So we get -2 over -5 or +2 this. Vertical asymptote is when the bottom is 0. So we get +5 and -1. Those are lines, so I need the equation, you have to draw them as dashed. Okay, horizontal or oblique. So if we look, we have x divided by x squared. What does that tell us? If we divide that, we have 1 over x. If x is on the bottom, it's y equals c. Not a big deal that we have a point on that, because I told you you can cross a horizontal asymptote. So the middle section, I know I have to go through this point. It's not going to bounce because it wasn't squared. So it just has to go through and keep going down. For the others, we need to plug in something, so if I put in a -2, I get -4 over -7 times -1, so -4/7, so that's negative, so it's down here. And then something bigger than this, so if I put in a 6, I get 4 over 1 times 7, so 4 over 7, that's positive, so that's actually